Hey gang, first I just want to thank all of you for the great comments and encouragement with this restoration series. Hey, I just want to give you a quick warning. The majority of this video is going to be the fabrication of those brackets on the rear end. If you do any kind of fabrication on your own, it's going to be very helpful. However, if you're only interested in watching this series progress, this particular video ended up being a little long-winded, so I'm kind of turning it into just a bracket fabrication 101. A lot of good information, and a lot of the decision-making process and why I went with this system is included in it. So enjoy it. If not, skip over it, and we'll do the installation of the bracketry and the rear suspension in the next video. Thanks again. Appreciate all of you. Oh, hey folks, welcome back to KEI Fabrication. Alright, I did some bracket layout here. I've got 4 options for my heim joint center line. Oops, 4 options on the lowest side. I'm not doing anything with this one. So 4 options there, 3 options on the top. I'll cut that out of my cardboard aided design and I'll lay it out on this, and I'll copy this 4 more times, and I'll do all the drilling and hole sawing first. So because the axle tubes have flanges welded on both ends of the axle, one for the backing plate for the braking system that's much larger than the axle tube, and then the bell where it bolts onto the actual housing for the quick change. So I'm going to slice through the bracket once it's created, and then I can stitch these back in just to get some full hoop strength on that bracket. So one of the things that I like to do with my brackets, and a lot of chassis builders do, is they like to have a edge on the bracket that'll end up being perpendicular to earth or ground, or the ground, and that allows you to put an angle finder or a level on the back to know when your pinion angle is close or what your pinion angle is being adjusted to just by having something on there. So these are way more elaborate than what was on the rear end. I was going to make them out of box tubing. I didn't have the right thickness, so I've got to make 4 individual brackets. It's going to be very time consuming. When they're all cut out, I'll transfer the punch locations into where the holes are going to be drilled, and then I will stack them all up, tack weld the edge of the bracket to each other, and then drill them all at the same time. So these should be pretty consistent. So a little more elaborate than I wanted to do, but because I didn't have the right size material for making them out of box tubing, I'm basically going to double the amount of work and probably triple the amount of time to make them, but I think it'll be worth it in the long run. What I'm hoping to show you folks is that when you've got your cardboard template, how do you make brackets that are nearly as identical as possible to each other? I'm using a relatively thin piece of cardboard. It's just Dollar Tree or Dollar General poster board, and what ends up happening is the more you use it, the more the edges get folded, and the worse your bracket comes out. So if I only have to do the center punching and tracing once, the template that I'm using is going to be as in good a condition as it can be, rather than tracing it 4 times and cutting them all individually. Cutting out the contours and drilling all the holes simultaneously really is the only way to ensure having 4 brackets that are as accurate as they can be when you're making them from scratch. Hopefully that's a helpful hint. Alright, so what you can see here is I have traced my template out on my bracket, and I've center punched everywhere there's a hole to be drilled. I've cut the blanks long enough so when I cut the bottom and the top, I'll have material on either side of the blade when I've cut. If you watch some of my previous videos, I explain the importance of doing that so the blade doesn't try to jump off the parent material and make it difficult and give you a real jagged edge. So this is all going to be bandsawed out. What I've done here is I've squared off the bottom and I've squared off the back, because what I really want to end up with is this is going to be the mill edge. This is going to be my reference point for putting my angle finder on. So I'm using the mill edge of the material I'm making the bracket out of, and then this will be an uncut edge. Every other contour and every other shape will be cut on the bandsaw. So I'm using my rear end jig table here as reference. You saw me tap the bracketry with some clamps here, and now I'm going to put some welds to hold that into position. So, and I'll do all of the drilling and all of the contour cutting on all four of them at once, and I'll actually take them while they're still welded together, or even after I've cut away all of the edges, and I can, because the holes already exist, I can bolt them together. Then I can put them on the belt sander and fine-tune all of the edges to make the brackets look like they were made from a stamping or a laser cut. In other words, they look good instead of just being done with an axe. So I'm going to weld these edges together in strategic locations where the saw is not going to cut. Then I'll proceed to go over to the drill press and I'll drill all of the holes through the parts all at once. One of the tricks you can use, if you have one, to make sure that your drill point is finding the center punch mark is if you use a center drill in your drill chuck. It's a much shorter drill, it's a much more rigid body drill, and it doesn't deflect and kind of allow the drill bit to find its own location. So it'll actually pull the part. When you find the center point, it'll actually pull the part to the desired location. And I'm just using it as a starter. So this will give you the confidence that you found the center punch mark and that the drill bit isn't deflecting. So when the proper size drill bit comes in, you know that the drill is going to actually start following the path that you want it to. So now I've got my starter locations all marked out. I can use my pilot drill to work through the part. When you're making precise brackets, kind of recommend your pilot drill be a brand new drill or a really good high quality sharp drill, because if it's not, it has a tendency to wander or drill a hole that's not perpendicular to the surface. So this one's making pretty good chips. And I'm going to use the plunge and then retract to clean out the hole before I finish all the way through. So it's a time-consuming process, but it's the best you can do to keep the drilling perpendicular to the work surface. I'm purposely not using a lubricant on this drill because a lot of the lubricants will actually take the bluing die off of the parent material, and then I have nothing to follow when it's time to cut it out on the bandsaw. So it's a little bit abusive to the drill bit, but in my opinion it's worth it to maybe go through a drill bit more frequently than normal without using a cutting tool oil. Alright, this is a super handy thing to have. If I don't take the breakthrough burrs off of the holes, when you have it on the table, it'll actually rock back and forth. And now I have the ability to flip this, drill halfway through with the next size drill bit, flip it over, start from this side and drill the rest of the way through, and now I won't have those burrs showing up on the edges, and it'll make the drilling process quicker and kind of average out the placement of the holes because I'm drilling from two sides, particularly when I do the 2 1/4 inch hole saw. So I'm going to start with the 2 1/4 hole saw now. That's the diameter of this old quick change that's in the number 7 modified. And my pilot drill here is slightly smaller than the center drill for the hole saw, so that'll actually be cutting material as it tries to go into the parent material and register the hole saw itself. Again, I'm going to do this one now because it's absolutely the most miserable drilling out of all of these. It's noisy, it likes to wander around and walk. This drill press, if you've seen my videos before, I've said it many times, when I drill with a hole saw more than 1 inch in diameter, that's anything larger than that is way beyond the capacity of this drill press. That's okay. I have the belt set up on this drill press loose, so if it jams or binds, it just slips on the belt, and that stops me from really muscling the hole saw through the part. And even though I have a little leverage applied here in terms of preventing the twist, I know that I can overcome the belt slippage. If the hole saw binds up, it's not just going to rip the workpiece off out of my hands or, you know, injure me in any way, because I don't have any stops other than the support of the table and the main post of the drill press. Anyway, some of you might disagree with that and say it's unsafe. I've always been taught to keep the belt on my drill press loose for that very reason, to prevent that wind up or that wrap up You can imagine trying to set this up in a vise or with clamps with all these holes that I'm drilling, and this really isn't all that many, to quickly move around and drill these holes. If I had to re-fixture every single hole, first of all, I'm not sure I'd be able to do it and get the exact placement based on the fixturing that I have. So to compensate for that from a safety standpoint is make sure your belt is loose on the drill press. Make sure you got a big handle with a lot of leverage to counteract it. And again, if it lets go, the workpiece will come around and make contact with the post. So I'm going to drill this now because it's the worst one, and then I'll come back to these. So the methodology here is to drill at least halfway through the stack, flip it over and drill from the other side back, and what that does is that stops me from drilling or cutting into my drill press table. The center drill can go all the way through because there's the clearance for that. If I don't do that, I have to put some sort of sacrificial material in, and that will end up providing an opportunity for this thing to go in way many places than it's going to go already, places that I don't want it to go. So anyway, this is the worst part. Let's get it over with. Save these, they come in handy. There's one. There's two. Alright, it's time to flip. Clean the table off so I got a nice flat reference. Same thing with the parent material. And I'll start from this side and go the other way. Hopefully you can see that it stalls out and just slips the belt, and it's really not putting a whole lot of pressure on me, and I can maintain safety and control. Number 3. Alright, there's number 4. You can see that my gluing die kind of got polished off by the fine metal filings coming off of the saw blade. So the good news is that because I used a scribe, the line is actually into the metal itself, so I can still follow it when it's time to cut the contour out. So I'm going to transition over. I'm going to clean this all up really good. Transition over to drilling these out to the finished size. One of the things that you have to do is be patient. Just because I have a pilot drill doesn't mean I can just slam a 5/8 drill through it. I'm going to do several steps in pilots, and then my last pilot will be a 9/16 drill, and then a 5/8 drill that'll go all the way through all 4 brackets at a time. So patience is key, and it saves wear and tear on drill bits, and it just makes the holes a lot cleaner and more precise. Alright, I'm going to cheat a little bit here. I'm going to use a step drill to get some of the piloting process done. assuming this lives long enough, I can go as far as I can with from this direction, and then flip it over and come from the other direction to finish out the hole. So this will get me to a 1/2 inch, then I can go to the 9/16, and then the final 5/8 drill hole. The reason why I like using the step drills is it does a much quicker job, again assuming you got a decent one and it lasts long enough. And the second thing is it automatically deburrs the next size, so when I flip it I'm taking the burr off, so once I start making the holes it's not all raised up off of the bed and making my holes less precise. Let's see how I make out with the step drill. Alright, just to get to this point, starting from cardboard, getting to the point where the center holes are drilled for all of the mounting points and the axle tube, and the contours traced out on patterns that are stacked together, you're looking at about 2 hours. Is it worth going through this? Well, the material alone for this was probably 50 bucks, okay? I probably could have bought a set of 4 brackets that were close, but the problem with this application is it's a 2 1/4 diameter axle tube. It's totally not available from any chassis builder that sells brackets and so on and so forth. So my only choice was to custom make brackets, and you know, it would have probably cost $100 to purchase what I would consider an entry-level set of 4-link brackets if I had a 3-inch axle tube, but they're just not available, so you really have no choice but to make this stuff from scratch. So all said and done, I'm probably going to have 3 hours into the brackets, but they'll be the right bracket for my application. So, and this is the way I was taught probably close to 25 years ago, because the only people that were selling brackets was like Tim McCamus or Bicknell. There, you know, you couldn't buy these from Summit or Jegs or whatever. Just the people who were building their own chassis were few and far between. And everything we did in the shop that I was basically an apprentice at was custom. You know, every street rod, every pro street car, every drag car, every circle track car was kind of custom. Now the circle track is a little different because you had, you know, Troy or Port City, and you know, there was more circle track bracketry available than drag race bracket or street rod bracketry. So we did everything exactly how you see it here, and it took a long time, and you know, that's why custom built hot rods and race cars are expensive. So when you don't have something available for your application, some simple layout tools and some simple fabrication skills can get you some nice brackets. It's going to take time. Will it be any less money? Probably less material costs, but it's certainly going to be a huge investment in time. And basically, if you're doing this for yourself, you're working for nothing anyway. And I don't know if you could charge an hourly rate that people would pay to do the custom stuff. And to speed the process along so the car is not in your shop you know, for a year. You know, you could make that 6 months if you found a chassis builder that had a combination that worked for you and your customers, and you buy their parts and bring it in-house. Then the cost justification at the end of the day, the final bill is materials and labor, and instead of spending 4 hours just getting to the point where you can tack brackets on the rear end or on the chassis, when the stuff comes in the mail, you open the box and you tack it on the rear end. You're talking maybe a half hour of fine-tuning and fixturing. So in the long run, even though those brackets cost a fair amount of money, especially for high-end chrome moly brackets with all of the science and geometry built into them, you know, they're expensive. However, to make those on your own is very expensive to the end user and the customer. But I don't have a big budget, so I spend what I have to on material, and then the rest is just sweat equity, right? All right, hopefully some of these tips have been helpful and it's not been too boring for you. All right, so I've just traced my lines again to make sure they're good and crisp and easy to follow. I've put a headlamp on to make sure that I can see the lines, because to be honest with you, this portion of the shop doesn't have the best lighting. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this contour out, and I'm going to take my time because I'm cutting through 3/4 of an inch of material stacked up here. So I'm not going to, you know, put a bunch of force on the blade. I'm going to do the best I can to very gently follow the contours so I get a good edge that's consistent all the way through. I'm going to adjust my guides for the blade to hold it in position as close to the bracketry as I can. And I'm going to strategically plan my cutting so some areas will remain connected with the welds that I put in, and then at the very last minute I'll go ahead and cut away the stuff that the last contours or whatever that'll eliminate the attachment with the welds. This could be totally avoided if I had a really expensive CNC plasma cutter. They'll even cut the holes very accurately. You know, I don't have the $2,500 to buy one of those as much as I'd like to, and I don't necessarily have the space to put one in and set it up. So for now, this is the way we have to do it. So you can see I've got the blade cutting pretty good through all 4 surfaces. Now, one of the techniques that you use when you're following the saw cut is the scribe line. You can either take the line or leave the line. I choose to stay on the outside of the line and leave the line on the material that I want to keep, or the bracket that I want to end up with, because there's probably some inconsistency on the taper and the kerf going all the way through a part this thick, and it gives me the opportunity to take it down and fine-tune it on the belt sander so all of the edges don't look saw cut, they actually look basically machined. So by leaving a tiny bit of material, basically the thickness of your scribe line, you're giving yourself a little insurance policy, so you've got enough material left to take this down and still end up with the strength in the bracket that you had imagined. So I purposely deviated from the cut line here. I backed up and went to the outside because I wanted to leave the tack weld here to hold the bracket together. I'm going to do the same in a couple of locations. So the very last thing that I'll do is cut the final contour, and the tack welds will hold everything in place until the very last segment of the cut. So I'll show you what the finished bracket looks like after I'm done bandsawing out the final contour. Whenever you have a mill edge of the bracket that's straight, that's, you know, several minutes of cutting and sanding that you save yourself for that finished edge. So, you know, there's 8 inches of material that I didn't have to cut, and because I'm cutting 3/4 of an inch, I'm going very slow, and I'm trying to be very accurate, and again, leave the scribe line behind. So you're talking a matter of maybe 20 thousandths thickness of my scribe line, and I'm trying to stay within that. Probably my tolerance on that cut line could be as close as 10 or 15 thousandths. So that's the amount of material I have to clean up the edges of my bracket to make it look professional. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the outside of this. I'm going to spare you the watching of that, and I'll show you the finished product before fine-tuning the edges with a belt sander. When I do that, and I cut these final tack welds off that's holding the stack together, now I have these holes precisely located. I can nut and bolt those to clamp the whole stack together again, and now I can go through and use the belt sander to final finish the edges of my bracket. Alright, I got a tremendous amount of work to do here, so I'm going to start out slow and taper off.